And we're live. Arr.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of React 30, the podcast all about React, where we promised never to waste more than 30 minutes of your time. Joining me, so I'm one of your hosts, Michael Jackson. Joining me today is our producer, Kent. Say hi, Kent.
Hey there.
Aren't you supposed to say, like, yo-ho?
Yeah, yo-ho.
And joining us from Vancouver is our other co-host, Ryan.
Hey, Vancouver, BC, by the way.
That's right, that's right.
Up here in the Northwest. What you mean by Vancouver?
Ah, yes, you have to be very specific.
Yeah.
British Columbia, not Washington.
You're in Washington State.
That's right, that's right. And our special guest this week is Dustin Kasten. Say hi, Dustin.
Hi, Dustin.
See, he's very, very precise.
Oh, jeez.
I like that. You've obviously, he's probably married. He's used to doing exactly what she asks him to do. Right? He's learned very, very quickly. So Dustin is the author of, among many other interesting things, a library called React Hardware. And so we are going to be talking about that tonight. He's also been he's probably the foremost expert that I know outside of the React core team on what the heck is going on when React is like rendering stuff. So we're going to be talking to him a little bit about that too. Hopefully we'll do some deep dives kind of into the internals of React and what it actually takes to render. But we're super, super happy to have him on the show. So welcome, Dustin. You're in North Carolina right now, right?
That is correct. I'm in North Carolina.
Charlotte?
And thank you for having me. Basically, Charlotte.
Okay. Yeah, well, if you said anywhere like near, I wouldn't know anything, so Charlotte is the only city I know, so I don't even know why I asked.
And we're going to be there in, like, a few weeks.
3 weeks? Yeah.
That's right. React Training is coming to Charlotte in, what's that, July 20-something, right? 23rd? 20?
Yeah, I don't know. I have to look at the
All right,
calendar.
if you are in Charlotte and you're listening to the show, you should buy tickets and go.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Thank you, Dustin. We'll pay you your cut later. Thank you for saying that. So you're the organizer of the local React meetup there in Charlotte. Is that right, Dustin?
No, the Charlotte JS, the JavaScript meetup I am.
Oh, okay. JavaScript meetup.
There's actually a React meetup starting. I've tried to defer them from starting it, not because I don't love React, because I do, but the Charlotte community isn't. I don't think it's big enough to sustain multiple meetups all in the same exact space.
Yeah, you got to watch out for that, right? You don't want to be, competing on.
Have too many splinters, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, about how many people in the JavaScript meetups you get out there? How many people kind of at a really good meetup?
All right, so it's kind of sad. I actually organize the two largest meetups in Charlotte between Scream Tech Talks and Charlotte JS. Both of them have like 1,500 members on Meetup with an average attendance of 30. So
that's not
we're
sad.
very low
30
on.
people, that's great. 30 people is awesome.
1,500? That's a pretty low percentage.
Well, people, on Meetup, they're not. It's not a high level of commitment,
Yeah. If I was in marketing, that would be like a really terrible conversion rate.
Yeah, it's a good thing you're not in marketing.
Yeah.
Is that a conversion rate or a bounce rate?
Well, we're stoked that you're doing awesome stuff out there in Charlotte. Tell us a little bit about this library. So I mentioned that Dustin authored this library called React Hardware, and I have to admit, when first time I heard React Hardware, it took me about 5 seconds, and then I was like, that would be really, really cool. Right?
So I was screwing around with hardware and React at the same time, and I was like, what would be cool is if I could just have like this component that explained a board, and then like have components for LEDs, and I tweeted it, and Dustin's like, guess what?
Dude, look at this. I already did it.
So maybe we should get like a baseline of what this thing even is, like, what it is, and then what use cases it covers, like why it's useful.
Yeah, definitely.
Would the answer it's not useful be appropriate? All right, so
I saw on the webpage it's an alpha quality, lots of churn, right? That's to be expected, right? I mean, we're controlling hardware with JavaScript. That whole concept is alpha quality, in my opinion.
yeah. So I'll story form this. I've had an Arduino sitting on my desk at home for like 5 years now. Never touched it. Started using React a little over 2 years ago. I was really interested by the idea of, your UI is a function of your state and props. I was like, what if I could, I don't know anything about hardware. What if I could, do this thing to take the same thing about React and apply it to hardware? And, I had this idea before React Native was even announced. And wrote up this gist. It's still probably, on my public gist thing, of the code that I wanted to write and see happen, which would be, the proof of concept for React hardware. And then it kind of sat as a gist and an idea for 2 or 3 months. And when I used to work in Uptown Charlotte, I rode the bus. So over the course of 2 or 3 days, I started hacking on the bus and got it working. Well, at least in code, so console logs, deep in React internals said that it was working. So one day I kind of avoided my client work and started grabbing Arduinos from the office and doing this instead. Ooh, how scratchy is this audio?
A little bit skippy, but sometimes Hangouts will clean it up for us. So yeah, we'll just keep going. Hopefully this works out.
We'll trust in the Google overlords.
That's right.
Yeah. So that's kind of how it started. It was an idea, and then I wrote it on the bus over a few hours. I got a proof of concept. And since that point in time, 2 years ago, it's received about 2 hours every other month of commitment from me, which is why it doesn't really do that much. It's actually pretty primitive at this point. It does work. You can write to LEDs. You can receive events back from basic components. They're all pretty small and simple. But the idea of taking the ideas of React elsewhere were really compelling, still are really compelling to me. And not to discount what anyone else in the JavaScript hardware community is doing, because I don't think any of this would be possible without guys like Rick and Johnny Five. But there are some really interesting things in the React community, like the React Dev tools and other tooling that I think has some really interesting applications for React and hardware.
So actually, this may be diverting just for a sec, but you were talking about the React Dev tools and made me think of this. So could you presumably make these components totally separate from React hardware, actually rendering to hardware, so that you could maybe write unit tests on it and stuff and have all the benefits of the React ecosystem, and it just doesn't actually render to the hardware until you actually run it? Is that kind of would that work?
Yeah, totally. So if you there's a mock Firmata node module that mocks all of the actual Firmata protocol, which is what React hardware is built on. Same thing Johnny 5 is built on. And so if you actually pull down the repo and just set node env to test and then run all the examples, you can actually run them, connect them to the React Dev tools without actually having hardware plugged in. So you can actually interact with the hardware without actually having hardware. So theoretically, you have unit tests as well and everything. Of course, the big caveat here is real-world electricity is different than unit tests, so you could still start a fire or whatever. But
I want that unit test to start a fire.
Oh, man.
Takes Selenium test to a whole new level.
Yeah, that's part of my assertion. Expect thing to start fire.
Well, then you run it, and then you run it in Travis, right? And then they've got fires in their data centers. What's going on? And it's people. So,
can you explain? Just kind of walk us through a couple components, what they are, and what it might look like as the developer typing it out to try to control some hardware with this.
Yeah. So to contrast it with the DOM, the DOM you have divs and spans, et cetera, and each one has different properties or attributes that you write that actually impact what happens on the screen. So with hardware, as far as I understand it. And literally, I don't know anything about hardware, and I wrote this project not knowing anything about hardware. I still know nothing about hardware. So, large grain of salt there. But the core thing is like it's just a pin, really, and it's put into a port, and you apply a value to it, which eventually turns into electricity. That pin has a different mode, whether it's an input, output, servo, I squared C, I think. There's like 10, 12 of them total. They're all documented in the Firmata protocol. And then also you can use on-read handlers to actually get the data back. So at the bare basic, you just write a component that renders a pin, lowercase p, stick it in a port, apply a value to it, apply a mode to it, and you're going to start writing to it. And then if you want to get data back, you add a on-read handler, which is similar to like a on-click or on-change in the DOM.
Sounds awesome. So underneath, you're using Firmata, you said? The node module?
Correct.
Is that the name of it? Firmata? It's been a while since I was familiar with it.
I think the node module is called Node-Firmata. And Firmata is a protocol like HTTP, just for communicating with hardware instead of servers.
Okay, and so that's got a whole bunch of imperative stuff to work with hardware, and then you just wrap that thing up. Not just, sorry. But then you very painstakingly wrap that up in React with a renderer.
I would have used the word just because I wasn't part of that Twitter storm that happened over the past week or whatever. They were saying just in documentation is bad. Yeah,
Wait. I missed that thing. Somebody said that saying just in documentation was bad.
That
was like a big overgeneralization of the conversation that happened.
No, that's fine. I love overgeneralizing things.
That's why we have 30 minutes.
It helps me understand them better.
That actually reminds me of, I think, Ryan, you tweeted a couple weeks ago about how somebody asked you to stop saying just in a workshop.
Yeah.
And you just render it.
This is our first episode.
You just call this function. So actually, Dustin, I think it's super cool. You mentioned how you know nothing about hardware, but like you've actually built this thing that like does something, and I think that's super cool. And for our listeners, like I hear this time and time again from people who are doing cool stuff with hardware. They're just like, I don't know hardware, but they're still doing awesome stuff, which makes me think that like hardware with JavaScript is totally approachable. And so if you're thinking about doing something, you've got like an Arduino in your cupboard or whatever, just pull it out because like, yeah, people can do cool stuff and not know anything about hardware. I think that's cool.
So what does that mean for me, who has tried to do cool stuff and has failed? My children, for years, we've been talking about building a robot.
Well,
robot.
Maybe I shouldn't have said
that. Dustin, do you have like robot and then like arms 5 and like?
Yeah, doing something with a button is very different than like a full robot, I suspect.
Okay, tell me about
taking a gander.
Do you have a singularity component? We could like just render one of those.
It's not part of core, but I think it's definitely community extension.
Or like an Ultron component, you know, you just render one of those guys and see where it goes.
Okay, so tell me, what was it like? Because you started this before React Native, and when React Native showed up, we got React like split up into all these little components, and it became possible to build these renderers where instead of calling a render to the DOM or render to string, now we could build a custom renderer and render these React UI descriptors, these React elements, to something other than the DOM, like Canvas or SVG, or in your case, hardware. What was it like before React Native came and made React a little bit better, and what was it like after?
So before it was like, I mean, I didn't know anything about React internals either. So I was playing in two very murky areas as far as my knowledge was concerned. I really like React hardware. I wanted to learn about hardware, and I wanted to learn about React internals, so why not learn both at the same time? So the initial idea was before Native came out, but my first few attempts, I don't quite recall how far they've made it, but not very far, to say the least. So the very first implementation I mentioned that I wrote on a bus was literally like copy pasting files out of React Native until it worked. And so I still basically like I finished and it worked, and I had no idea how it worked or why it worked. And I suspect that it was way more complicated than it needed to be. But since then, even though there's still no first-class APIs, this isn't like a publicly supported thing to write renderers. It's becoming a lot more natural, and there's a lot more examples of the community. There's like 15, 20 different custom renders that exist. So finding examples is a lot easier, and like the bare minimum hooks are a lot more well understood. I suspect so. At that point, I decided, like 6 months into it, to throw away everything from the initial React hardware and rewrite the entire thing from scratch. And now I actually know what all of the code does in React hardware, which is a huge plus compared to the previous version.
Which kind of brings me to the next thing that I wanted to talk about. So you're talking about, these alternative renderers. I like to describe the render in React as like a two-phase process, like a two-step process, right? So there's because that word render is so it's so overloaded because lots of other frameworks and paradigms use it. In fact, I remember we had a discussion with Tom Okino at Facebook, and he was telling us about he said, my one contribution to React was what did render used to be called?
I think it was called Get Component Descriptor. Get
Component Descriptor. In like the original React API, it was just a getter method, right? And Tom's like, no, that thing needs to be called render. So they changed the name to render, and now I think it just really confuses the heck out of everybody. But so we have
or less than Get Component Descriptor.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it was probably a good move, but I always have to describe it as like this two-phase thing, right? So obviously there's the get component descriptor part of it, which is just tell me what the UI is, and then there's the I call this the make it so part of it, right? The actually like, okay, now draw some pixels, or in your case, send some volts over to this LED, or in the canvas or whatever you're working with. So it's such a cool abstraction that as you said, we're starting to see lots of different libraries. I tried to get Michael Johnston from Flipboard to come on React 30 and talk to us about the React Canvas work that he did. Unfortunately, he's working on his own startup right now, so I don't know if he'll be able to join us sometime soon. But what other ones have you seen? I've seen there's React Blessed, I know, for interfacing with it basically just uses the Blessed node library, right, for drawing stuff into the terminal. And then we've got React Hardware. There's React Canvas. Which other ones have you seen that you think might be kind of interesting?
So I've actually been trying to collect a list of these on my website. So there's React X11, I think, is pretty interesting. React targeting the X11 windowing thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. React Titanium, cool. There's React Native Desktop, which is just React Native forked. React Gibbon, which is a non-public one for Netflix's proprietary rendering engine. React Blessed is cool. React A-Frame. A-Frame is a WebVR library, so that's cool. React Art.
That one's by Eric Florenzano, right?
I don't.
Red-haired guy
so.
gave a talk to the React Conf. Huh.
Yeah, I don't think it's by him. He mentioned. I think like his whole talk kind of led up to saying, "Oh, and this thing exists over here, so totally use this."
Okay.
That's awesome. When you mentioned X11, when you're talking about like React controlling things at that kind of level, it reminded me of Sebastian's talk from React Europe 2015. Do you recall that talk, Dustin, where he's talking about like, what if the GPU understood these sort of declarative kind of components. Do you remember that? You were probably totally geeking out about that at the time. I think the rest of us, me included, were just kind of like, what is he even talking about? I think I get it a little bit more now that I've worked with React a little bit more. But do you have any thoughts on that?
I'm really, really excited about the incremental renderer that Sebastian's working on, and the idea of doing layout in React, which sounds pretty crazy. It probably is crazy, but I think, once again, even if it totally fails, the ideas and the explorations that it'll make possible, I think are really interesting. Are you familiar with the incremental renderer? Should we talk about that at all?
I would love it if you would dive into that, because I've been totally on the fringe. I haven't dived in too deeply. Tell us about it.
All right. So currently, you mentioned React's like a little bit about the internals earlier.
Yeah.
How like you give it this description, and then eventually it makes it a thing that actually shows up in your browser, or whatever target environment you have. So the process that actually like does the make it so part is the reconciler.
Yeah.
Which takes the previous and the new and makes the new the real thing. So currently it's a synchronous process. Like whenever you call set state, whenever you call render the first time, it's a single pass all the way through thing. So with the incremental renderer, React will actually have complete control over scheduling every single tiny piece of what's getting rendered. It's going to have, instead of just one single tree, it might have multiple trees at a single time internally for what should be rendered. And as such, it can now schedule things more intelligently. So it can do things like only schedule stuff that's on the screen currently to be actually reconciled and rendered. Stuff that's on the off the screen, you can like defer that till a future point in time. We'll eventually get to it. Blah blah blah. So this lays a foundation for a lot of interesting things in React DOM. I think it pulls some ideas out of React Native. I don't really know. Once again, all I do is read PRs. I'm not involved at all in any capacity.
Well, so that's
definitely changes.
Yeah, it's really interesting to think about, because React already, as an abstraction, handles a lot of stuff for me under the hood, right? Like the event system, for example, that does object pooling and stuff like that, right? So this is yet another kind of step up on the abstraction ladder, which I think could be really cool, right? Which is the framework would essentially know how to prioritize work based on the things that are actually visible in the viewport. We actually have a section. It's kind of related to it kind of reminds me, I guess, of the concept of windowing, which I'm sure you're familiar with, right? Just work on what is in the viewport. We actually have a section on windowing that we cover in our advanced training workshop. But yeah, it's really interesting to actually have that be baked in, part of the abstraction. Because right now it still is kind of a manual process. But if there were, at the React sort of framework level, if it could prioritize work based on what it knows about, what the user can see, that would be pretty awesome.
Yeah, windowing could very well be a first-class thing you can remove from your training in the future. But like another thing React is not very good at today is...
Wait, what? No.
No, you just get new stuff to put in there.
Oh,
right.
okay.
And the robots are replacing the humans.
Okay.
We're fine.
You do a React hardware class.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, so another cool thing you can do is, or React today is not very good at animations. And this has the potential to make animations a first-class entity inside the React world.
Yeah.
Do you know about reparenting? Is this part of that too? You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, totally know what you're talking about.
So you're
fairly certain I saw references to reparenting inside the PR commentary somewhere.
Do you want to delve into what parenting is, maybe?
Yeah, so imagine you're on an iPhone or whatever, and you're looking at a picture, and then you want to email it to somebody, and so you click the button that says email, and then that image that you're looking at like kind of scales down and then animates, and then like in behind comes the mail app, and then the image like drops right in to the mail app right there. So the node, if we're thinking about the DOM, has one parent, and then you want to animate it to somewhere else on the screen, and it have another parent without like a component did unmount and a component will mount. You want that thing, its life cycles to all survive and not do unmount, remount, and all that kind of stuff. Be able to treat the thing like it's been in the screen the whole time.
No,
As my understanding of it.
I feel like I've seen you give a demo of that, Ryan, with the router. Is that right?
I might have done something that faked it, but I don't think so.
Doesn't your magic move thing fake that?
Yeah.
Fake that, Ryan?
I guess a little bit. You can render a clone off the page, and but you're still going to get all of your mounting and unmounting hooks and stuff happening. That
Right, so you'd have to do some work yourself to make sure that things like at least appear to the user to be the same node. But what you're talking about is this reparenting feature could actually land in React to make it so that it actually is the same node. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, as far as React's concerned, you're going to get a component will receive props when you switch it from one parent to another rather than unmount and then did mount and will mount, of course. But again, this is just me assuming from a couple of conversations I've heard. I can't remember exactly what it's all about.
We're just a bunch of outsiders about things we heard through the vine.
So I actually have a confession to make, guys. I forgot to start the timer, and I
oh my gosh!
So I started it, but I started it at like some random time, like I don't know, 10-ish minutes into the show. So like I don't know.
I think we're good.
So on the YouTube video right now, right about when you started saying what you just said, we're at 26, almost 27 minutes.
All right, I'm going to go on that. I'm going to go based on that. Okay, so Dustin, the last thing I wanted to kind of talk about, we've kind of gone all over the place here, which is awesome. I love it. React 30, nobody ever say about React 30 that we don't dive deep, right? Like we talk about real stuff here. Dustin wrote this thing a couple of months ago, the Tiny React Renderer, which, if in case you haven't seen it, Dustin, I think it's like your most starred repo on GitHub, right? I mean, like, whatever stars mean.
It is. I'm actually a bit sad about that.
Right. Don't be sad about stars. It just means that you were trendy for a couple of days, right?
A couple hours. So, this is my petty reason for being sad, real quick. It's because React Hardware is the thing I actually care about, and Tiny React Renderer was like.
Yeah.
I think we'll talk about it more in a second.
I totally get it. I totally get it.
Yeah.
I wrote this thing like last Christmas called React Standard I/O that had the exact same effect. Anyway, but so you wrote React Tiny Renderer, and at the time, Ryan and I were struggling to figure out. We had this idea for the router, like maybe we could render to JSON, right? Like take this React, route component tree and render it to a JSON config, and we had talked to you about that actually at ReactConf. So when you wrote this React Tiny Renderer, I was like, or the Tiny React Renderer, I was totally stoked about it, and I read through every single line. So first of all, just a personal thank you from me to you, just for like taking the time to write that. I think that's huge, right? Just taking the time to sort of educate other people about what's going on. But what was interesting too to me about the Tiny React Renderer is that there was a whole part of the life cycle that we could kind of opt out of, right? Like we only really needed, if all we were going to do is render to a JSON string in this case, all we really needed was like component will mount, basically, right? Like here's your chance to set stuff up. Okay, now it's just a one-shot render to a string, and that's it, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, I thought that was really cool. Just wanted to say thank you for writing that out. If anybody is watching the show and they're interested in like the React render lifecycle, how it works, if you're interested in writing your own renderer, go ahead and check out Dustin's Tiny React Renderer, because that's a pretty cool little project. Okay, Dustin.
Yeah.
Anything? I think
Well,
I think we might just be out of time. Sorry, something else you wanted to bring up?
Oh, I was gonna say. So my closing note on that is that the whole reason that exists is because I kept trying to get React hardware talks at conferences, and they weren't getting accepted. So I wrote a more general like React internals. It's so cool. And so this is my conference-driven project, which I will be speaking out at All Things Open in Raleigh, North Carolina, in October. So if you want to see more than what's shown in that,
You know what? Next time somebody rejects one of your React hardware proposals, just propose something else, and then show up and be like, I just decided to talk about this instead anyway, right? Isn't that what Pete Hunt did last year at React Conf? Didn't he he was gonna talk about he was gonna talk about that CSS thing, and then he decided to talk about
CSS grid. Grid
yeah,
layer.
and then he was like, screw that, I'm just gonna talk about Kafka or something. It was awesome. All right, well, I think we are out of time. Our listeners hopefully won't get mad at us. Maybe I'm at 29 minutes. Maybe I'm at 31 minutes. Who knows? Roughly about 30. But thank you all for tuning in this week. Dustin, thank you so much. Can't thank you enough for coming on the show and talking with us. Your insight is invaluable. Thank you, man.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
All right, and we will see you all on next week's edition of React 30. Good night.
Bye.